Welcome everyone. My name is Imad Alashi. I'm a principal consultant at Insight. Thank you so much for joining this on-demand session about building custom connectors in Azure Logic Apps. If you're here, you probably already know that Azure Logic Apps have hundreds of connectors that is already available in Azure Logic Apps. We are talking about things like SAP, Dropbox, Adobe PDF tools, and much more. However, in certain situations, you will need to create your own custom connector. The question is, when do I need to create custom connector? In what scenarios? The most clear scenario or use case that you want to create a custom connector is when you have an API. If you have an API that your consumers consume normally, you probably want to provide them a rich experience using or consuming your APIs through Azure Logic Apps. And then this rich experience can be achieved by building a custom connector in Azure Logic Apps. This is the biggest scenario. If you are a service provider, or maybe you can also have an API within our organization. If you are a big organization and there's a lot of teams of developers, and everybody will want to use your API through Logic Apps, you also can create this custom connector that you can use and make or provide this rich experience for the end users or for the developers. However, you can ask yourself, I can just use the HTTP action from the built-in action in Azure Logic Apps. Indeed, you can, as a developer, as a consumer, or if someone wants to consume my API, they can just open Azure Logic Apps, create an HTTP action, and put my endpoint in the details here, and put the JSON payload that they want to submit in the request. And then once it comes back, they can parse the JSON that I'm going to provide from my endpoint. However, this is a really error-prone and like it's not the best experience you want to provide for your developers or the consumers of your endpoints. Compare this to what we are seeing at the moment. This is a screenshot from the Asana connector. Asana is a task management or project management service out there. They have their own connector, and you can see that once you have the connector, you can pick and choose which action that you can Asana provides. Let's take, for example, the create task. You can see also that having such a connector will give a very explicit guidance on how you can consume this action, the required fields, their types, and you can also feed the values from the previous actions into the right fields. And also you can see here that once the action is consumed, you can provide the response of that action to the next actions, like we are seeing here for the task ID being consumed there. So in a nutshell, we are talking about providing the best user experience for developers to consume your API through this connector by invoking your actions in a very explicit way, and also by providing them a way to listen to events that happen in your system. So you want to trigger an Azure Logic app that is listening to one of the triggers in your ecosystem or APIs. Today we're going to show an example for both situations. All this magic happens through the standard or the initiative that's called Open API, which is previously used to be called Swagger. So if you're familiar with Swagger, you probably will pick this one up. It's Open API. Open API is, if this is a crash course of API, it's a standard where you can define the behavior of your endpoint. You can have a general description like we are seeing in this screen, or you can provide details on what endpoints that are available in your API system, the parameters that your API consumes, in what format, and also some of the structured objects on how would you like to have the payloads. All right, now it's the moment that we have been waiting. It's demo time. For this demo, we are going to imagine that we have an API. We are an organization called My eBay. We are providing services like anyone who can consume our API, we have an endpoint to create an order, but also we provide a functionality to notify people of when a shipment is created. Of course, the way we do this is through webhooks. Webhooks is the industry way at the moment of how to do notifications and triggers in the HTTP world. Through our open API specifications, we are going to have both, and we are going to be able to configure our custom connector to do all of this for us. So let's see. I'm going to navigate to our Visual Studio Code. This is the open API specification file that we have that defines the endpoints that we are going to use in our system. You can see here that we have basic information about our endpoint. The name is, for example, My eBay Incorporation. We have a base path, and you can see here that we have our host is an ng-rock service. We're going to come back to this in a minute. We have the first endpoint, which is an order endpoint through which we can create an order. It expects a body, and the body expects to have a schema of the object that's called order. If we navigate to this object, you'll see that it's going to be an object that has several properties, like the ID, the customer ID, and more. And there's also a required part of this object that is customer ID. For anyone who is going to consume this object, this property should always be there. If you go back to the endpoints, this was the first endpoint, the order one. But also we need another endpoint to register our interest, to allow people who have interest in the shipment created event to be notified. So anyone who wants to be notified about the shipment created event, they should use the webhook endpoint here to register their interest by providing an object of webhook info. If we go there, you can see that this is the URL, or the property called URL, that is required to be supplied for them to be able to be notified. So they are going to send us their URL as an interest, like once a shipment is created, send me the shipment details to this URL. This is the basic open specification file. I just wanted to bring your attention to two things. In order for this open specification file, open API specification file to create the right trigger in the custom connector, Microsoft has added two extensions. The first one is this part of the open specification, open API specification. This tells that whoever is going to register for this webhook info is actually going to receive a shipment object. Yeah, this is the first thing. The second thing that I wanted to bring your attention to is that also from Microsoft, that it declares that this endpoint is actually a trigger, can be used as a Logic Apps trigger. All right, now that we are ready, we want to before we proceed, we want to host this API somewhere on a server to be able to be consumed. The way I chose to do this for this demo is to have a mock server locally called mock-on. Mock-on is an amazing mock server. I imported the Open API Specification file here, and it created these two endpoints for me, the order and the webhook. And I also, in order to expose it to the internet, because Logic Apps is on the internet, I used a tool called ngrok, where if we invoke this host, we are tunneling the requests to our local host environment here. So this is to bring your attention to this. All right, now we can go back to our portal, and we can create our custom connector. We go to create and write Logic Apps custom connector, and we create. We give a nice name for our custom connector, my Bay custom connector. And in the region, I need to put the same region our Logic Apps reside in. This is a small limitation, or it's not small, it's an annoying limitation. But if you are going to create a custom connector that's not going to be published to the marketplace, it has to reside in the same Logic Apps that is consuming this custom connector. We go ahead and create. Now, it's not going to take long to create a custom connector because there's no much logic there. Once it's created, we can go to the edit page, and will be presented with a wizard. This wizard will ask us to supply the Open API Specification file that's going to drive the whole thing. So I'm going to import this file. Once we import it, if you scroll down, you'll see that it already populated the information for us. Of course, this is the wrong host. I probably have the wrong host here, so I'm going to copy this host here and change it. I should have changed it in this Open Specification file as well, but I'm going to just change it here. This is the base URL, correct? We move on. We don't to the security. Now, we don't want to complicate things, so we are going to leave authentication type to none. However, in your real life, your API is going to be protected somehow, and there's ways in order for you to embrace this authentication type that you have. Now, if we check on the left-hand side, you will see that we have a section called Actions and a section called Triggers. This is the actions and triggers our custom connector will provide. The Azure Logic or the portal managed to parse our Open API specifications and figured out the actions and the triggers that we support. So if we click on Create Order, we look at the details. We can see that this is the endpoint that we are going to invoke in order for us to have this endpoint running. And if we delve into the body, you'll see also that we have all the properties that we have defined in our order object. If you scroll down more again, these are the responses that we are expecting to return from our API, and the validation says thumbs up, it's good. If we go to the shipment trigger, however, it says you can see that there is a problem with the validation. We're going to come in a minute for it. So in the description, we say register shipment created event. We scroll down. This is going to be the endpoint people will have to invoke to register their interest in the shipment created event. And they are going to supply us with the URL. The URL is going to be in the body. So if we edit, we can see that this is the property in the body that we are expecting to have. Scroll down. Now everything is set. However, this part is where it's obvious that whoever is going to consume this trigger, they will receive a shipment object that has the following properties. Okay. Scroll down a little bit more. This part is where we specify the property in the body, in the webhook information that we need to use for the URL. So in our case, it was the URL, just like explained before, and the validation is fine. Now that everything is set right, we can update the connector, and it will create the custom connector for us. Okay, lovely, it's created. We can close it now, and we can go to a logic app that we have let me go to my serverless resource group. I have already a logic app that is empty, and it already has a simple trigger of HTTP. This URL is going to invoke or is going to trigger this workflow to happen. Next step, we add an action. If we go to custom, you'll see that we have a custom, our custom connector is there, and we can check that we need an action that create a new order action. It's creating the connection for us. You can see that the customer ID is required because in our open API specification, we said that the customer ID is important to be existing for any order object to be valid. So we are going to just say 1, 2, 3. We don't care about this property, and then we finish. So if I hit save, it's saved. If I copy this URL again, and I go to Visual Studio Code, I'm going to create a new file and say post this method or this endpoint. I'm going to say I have already a Visual Studio Code extension to send HTTP request, so I'm going to say this actually is an HTTP request file, and then I'm going to send request. Now that we have posted, you can see that it's accepted. This means that our workflow is run successfully. If I go to our workflow here, we can see it in the runs. However, if we go to our mock server, check the history, you'll see that our endpoint was invoked. Lovely. This is awesome. This is for the custom action. But what about the trigger? We want to trigger our workflow here. So if we delete this from here, and we delete this action, and we want to say we want to create a new trigger, which is when shipment created, click on that, our custom MyBay custom connector. You can see that there's a register shipment created event. Click on that. It does not require any input from the user. So yeah, so it's once the shipment is created, we just send or we invoke an endpoint that the Logic Apps will have in here. So if I check the webhook, if I check here, you can see that there's nothing invoked from the webhook event. Once I save, you'll see that the webhook endpoint was invoked with a URL. This URL is a URL from Azure Logic Apps that we can use in our server to invoke once a shipment is created. So let's do this. Let's copy this URL and open Visual Studio Code. I'm going to create another file and say post this URL. However, this time we are going to create a shipment object. The shipment object, if I navigate to my open specification file, where's my shipment object? Shipment definitions. We have these properties. Let's just copy everything, paste, we need to provide a name and order ID. These are compulsory, so I'm going to say name and order ID. I'm going to remove everything else. The name will be my shipment, and the order ID is going to be 456. I'm going to say that this is actually an HTTP file and I want to send a request. If everything is fine, this means that the endpoint is triggered. Let's send it again. It says accepted. If we go to our runs, maybe if I close this one, go to, how do we see the runs? Refresh. Here you can see that we already have a run there, and you can see that we already received an object. It's probably encoded, so if I decode this in my Visual Studio Code, so I'm going to paste this and I'm going to say decode selection from base 64 to string. You can see that we have received the same object that we sent. All right, so if we go back to our presentation, you can see that we have created a custom connector that can invoke actions and can receive triggers where you can use it in your Logic apps. If you need more information, I know that this is an on-demand session. Please visit me on my handle Imad Ashi on Twitter or imadashi.com. I'll be very happy to have any conversation with you about this. Thank you so much.